Greetings, everyone. My name is Emily Louie, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I would like to welcome you to Fundraising Communications 4, one of 5 webinars in our free communications webinar series. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. Please close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. We recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. This will greatly improve your audio experience. If you are calling in using your cell phone, please move your cell phone away from your computer. Lastly, if you experience visual issues, please send a chat to Campbell & Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit that is good with your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. We won't be sharing slides from today's presentation, but we will be including a link to the recording in the follow-up email from GoToWebinar. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on the right side of your computer screen. We'll also hold time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Andy Brommel, Director of Communications Consulting, and Pat Chestnut, Communications Senior Consultant.
Thanks, Emily. All right, I'm glad we're into this part. Sitting still and knowing the camera's on and just like not making a face is the hardest part of doing all this.
It's my first time and I actually can't see myself, so I really hope I was not embarrassing. The whole firm, really.
I'm sure.
Not just myself, it's all of us.
You've brought shame to your family for 3 generations. So I'm Andy Brommel, Director of Communications Consulting.
And I'm Pat Chestnut, Senior Consultant in Communications.
And so today's topic is really one of our team's favorites, looking at fundraising materials and how to develop pieces that are really useful and valuable for fundraisers to make your jobs easier, especially around major giving, as we'll talk about. Today's topic, since we have Pat and I together, we're going to be a little more conversational. This is a little bit of a show and tell. We're going to show a lot of examples. We want to get you thinking about what your organization could be doing that suits your needs, that fits your budget, that makes your jobs easier as fundraisers. And as Emily mentioned, this is part of our Fundraising Communications webinar series. And the reason for this series is, we recognize that fundraising is really it is a communications practice, and every fundraiser is in some way a communicator or part of communicating a message. But for most fundraisers, they don't think of themselves that way, or that's not the main thing in their job description. So there's all this communications we have to do, but there are very few people whose job title is, development communications. So there's a lot of you folks out there playing communications roles without a whole lot of support. We find that most organizations struggle to really invest the time and the energy and the thought, sometimes the resources around the communications aspect of fundraising. So that's why we wanted to create these webinars, to put some best practices out there, give you some tools to work with, recognizing that it's a communications job that many of you are in. So the series that Emily mentioned, this is the 4th session. I won't go through all of them here. We have one more that's coming up in July that's all about campaigns. And I'll be joined by Anna Gorin for that session. We're looking forward to that. If you haven't attended the previous 3 that you see on the screen here, don't worry. This is not like calculus where if you didn't do the previous level, you're going to be in trouble or something. This is all pretty self-evident. And I will say, though, that all of these are recorded, and you can find them on our YouTube channel, along with dozens and dozens of other really good Campbell & Company webinars on a whole range of topics around fundraising, staffing, search, analytics, annual giving. There's just, you can get lost in all the great stuff that's on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to go check that out. And as Emily mentioned, we'd love if you ask us some questions. We're gonna save some time at the end for that, and that's always a good chance to make sure we're giving you what you need out of this session. So let's get into it, and I'm gonna set us up with a unrehearsed scenario.
They're my favorite kind.
You're gonna be fine.
Yeah, the only thing that might be more awkward than being on camera.
I have confidence in you. Okay, so I want Pat to go, and you can all, in your imaginations, go as well. Think about a scenario in which a friend or a colleague, someone you trust, someone you've got a relationship with, they ask you to have coffee with them. They want to talk to you about an organization that they're involved with. And you know about this, you've talked with them about it before. Maybe you've been to some of their events or made some smaller gifts to the organization. So you're not coming in cold, and you have the feeling that this is, they want to potentially ask you for a more significant gift. I want you to think about 3 ways that this could play out. The first is like all verbal. You sit down, they kind of walk you through the case verbally. They tell you why they got involved, what they've seen as being part of this organization, maybe they share a story that's why this is so compelling to them. And they're saying, this is what we're doing. We're getting ready to do more. We want to expand. We want to grow. And we'd like you to consider a gift of $1,000. Okay, so that's the first scenario. The second scenario is like that, but they have some materials with them that are just sort of general communications, like they might have their annual report or a recent magazine. So they're still mostly verbally walking you through the case, telling it from their perspective, but they're able to, bring out the annual report and say, oh, here's an example of a program, or here's, this story from the recent magazine. And then at the end, they can give you those materials and say, again, we'd like you to consider a gift of $1,000. That's scenario 2. Scenario 3, so at the beginning of the meeting, they have a folder, and they open this up, and they've got a brochure or some kind of, designed piece in there. And they lay that out on the table and say, listen, I brought this piece for you. We put this together for people who are considering a major investment in our organization. This is going to give you a sense of the bigger vision, what we're going for. It's going to show, you can find some stories in here that show the impact, some details around our plan. And I want to walk you through, my experience, why this organization matters so much to me, and what we're going for in growing our impact. And I'm going to leave this piece with you. You can take this home, spend some time with it. We'd like you to consider making a gift of $1,000. We want to make sure you have the information that you would need to really think about that. So how do those can you go there in your mind? Like, what's different about
I can't.
those?
I feel like I should preface this by explaining my personality a little bit, where I'm someone who wants to reflect on something like that a little bit more. I'm very unlikely to make that kind of big decision in the moment and in the room. And I'm also someone, though, who will kind of feel the pressure of that face-to-face meeting, that face-to-face ask. It's sort of, I think of like the awkward experience that some of us will go through if you live in cities, right? Where you kind of have like the people wearing their vests trying just to acquire new donors, or standing here in Chicago, they're all over State Street. Oh, yeah. And sometimes those interactions, they feel like they put me under pressure rather than at ease to really think about how I fit in and what I want to do. So to answer your question, Andy, I think in the first scenario where it's purely verbal, I feel like I would feel pressure to respond to you, but I wouldn't totally feel at ease responding in the way you want me to. I would probably say something like, yeah, I want to help out. Can I maybe give you $50 or $100? I would love to participate. I might do that, or I could see myself saying, this sounds great, but I just need a little bit of time to reflect on it. Can I go think about this? Can you maybe send me some information that I can go through more thoughtfully in my own time? I think the second scenario would be more of this sounds really cool. You guys are doing a lot of great work. I'm not, I would want to spend some time going through the various pieces you sent me, and then maybe can I call you to ask about what this new initiative is that you're asking me to participate in, or how my $1,000 gift's going to fit in there. I think the third one's going to be giving me really something it's going to give me exactly what I want to reflect on and dig into, where I'll understand that it's special. You'll have put me at ease by kind of saying like, hey, I'm going to leave this with you and give you time to reflect, but I want to share why it's so important. And then I can go and really think about if this is something that's meaningful to me, and that might actually cause me to want to stretch my giving and participate, knowing I could then follow up with you and kind of say, all right, this vision makes sense, and this one project really spoke to me. Could we talk a little more about it? Maybe you could give me a tour or share more information.
Cool. All right. So there's something different about those, like even just even if the person is kind of verbally giving you the same information, like just just having the different, it's like a different transaction in the conversation.
I think I just feel a different sense of ease and depth in my engagement with the third compared to the first. Whereas so the first, I feel a little just like there's something off.
It feels like you're more on the spot because it's only happening in the conversation.
I would feel that's so the way to put it. You'd be putting me on the spot, and I would appreciate what you're doing, and that is coming from a good place, but I wouldn't fully appreciate the situation or enjoy it.
Interesting. Yeah. So like even having the sort of pre-developed piece that's obviously prepared for the meeting conveys that like this is part of more of like an ongoing deliberation or like, because it's not just like all happening ephemerally in the conversation.
Yeah, and it feels like it's something that's it's like you're ready for kind of, you're understanding that this is a big deal for me.
Oh, yeah.
And you're not just kind of coming and putting me in an uncomfortable spot where I have to respond right away. And you're asking for a lot of money for a big thing I'm trying to process in the moment. You're saying, hey, this is a big deal and I want to leave this with you because I know that you're the kind of person who wants to go through it. But I want you to understand that this is significant and I want to begin a conversation with you. That's how I would take that.
Oh, there's almost like some respect conveyed in like having that.
Respect and then comfort too. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So I wanted to start with this scenario because with this topic, like we're trying to get at what are in these asks, these cultivation settings that you're all in day to day. What is the role of materials? What role are they playing, and how do they change the dynamic? And why does it matter? Like to me, it's not obvious that we would do this at all. Like it's 2019. Why are we even doing this? I can just email you stuff. Maybe there's a video. What do physical materials do? Because what we find, we don't have this bias particularly, but we hear from our clients like that they really value this and that they feel more comfortable when they have them. So we have some hypotheses about why that might be. I want to start with one. This is kind of at the deepest level of culture and norms and rituals, what I call it the material culture of fundraising, which is not a term that I made up. In fact, I actually copied and pasted it from Wikipedia. Material culture this is a term, an academic term. It's the aspect of social reality grounded in the objects and architecture that surround people, includes the usage, consumption, creation, and trade of objects, as well as the behaviors, norms, and rituals that the objects create or take part in. So that last part, the behaviors, norms, and rituals, is the part I'm really interested in. When you have a physical piece, when once you start thinking about this, like this kind of stuff is everywhere. I always think about this when we go to meetings and we exchange our business cards, because like what is more pointless than a business card in 2019? But it's just part of the thing. Or like think about things that feel more important. Like if you were going to your cousin's college graduation and all the pomp and circumstance, and then what they passed out was like a Microsoft Word list of all the people who were graduating, not like a formal program. Or like somebody invited you to their wedding with like a Facebook event rather than an invitation. Like we put care and thought into these things. It's part of the ritual.
I think there are two aspects of that too that we'll get into a little more later, but that do feel relevant to fundraising physical materials. Where with the business card, for example, I think about how I see those on my desk and they remind me of the people in a way that if I just kind of had it digitally, or if you email me your contact info, I get a lot of emails and sometimes things slip my mind. Let's be real, it happens to everyone. And then just the way the wedding invitation, like I'm a millennial, I get sent the digital wedding invitations. I can't even remember the website, like the Knots one that everyone has. I actually go there to get more information and to remember where I'm supposed to book everything. But getting the actual physical, well-produced, kind of beautiful invitation is just a reminder for all of us that we're participating in something special and sharing it.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's something like
changes the mindset.
It's like something persistent about physical materials, where like whereas anything digital is kind of ephemeral. So anyway, I feel like this raises the question. Since we're on the cultural level, like what norms and conditioned responses does it invoke when you give someone something that is valuable, that is well produced, and that was clearly made and intended just for them? Like when that changes hands, I think on some deep cultural level, like without either of you even saying it, you're already in the place of, what am I going to give you in return? Like we've given you this, what you just, your parents raised you, right? Like, what are you going to give in return? So anyway, that's on a very deep level, probably, the most abstract. Let's get a little more concrete. Materials make ideas real. And we mean this in two ways. At first, for your audience, like, again, when you put something in people's hands, it's real. This is really happening. They're serious about it. This campaign isn't just a concept. It's real enough to pull the trigger and put it into print. And then for you, or for the staff, for the organization, it makes you commit to ideas, to messages, to the information. Like the process of producing a piece that you're going to share really forces you to get real about what you're saying, to make decisions about the projects and the details that you might have, either put off or just haven't made yet. It's a way to, honestly, it's a great way to like focus staff attention on a project because, hey, this thing is going out the door soon. So it's funny, people can be, oh yeah, I'm on board with that idea, yeah, that project sounds good, and then you send them a draft, and they see the draft, and they're like, oh, we're actually gonna put this in front of donors. Like, then their editing mind or their like attentive mind kicks in, and they actually pay attention to the project. So it makes things real. They also give fundraisers confidence. We see this all the time. This could be your, really anyone. This could be your CEO, could be you, a major gift officer. Very much your board members and committee members in particular have this dynamic. People don't like to go into donor visits empty-handed. When they don't have materials, they don't have something, they can get really squirrely about even taking the meetings. They'll start putting up delays or objections, and they just feel like they equate the materials with the case. And you might have done all the work to clarify the case, but they might still feel that, like, I don't have the case if they don't have the material that kind of manifests it. And then when they do, they feel more confident. They feel like they have something to give in that sort of ritual way. They also feel like, if I get asked a question that I don't know the answer to, maybe the answer is in the piece and I can look to it. So the example we use here is Dumbo, for those of you who are, I keep wondering if this example is going to become like, if I'm going to lose the audience on this example, just age-wise at some point.
No, you can just spoil the movie and give away the main theme. That'll work.
Okay, yeah. All right, I'm gonna spoil Dumbo for you. So, mute if you don't want to hear that. But, he an elephant who can fly, he thinks it's because he has this magic feather. He's got this little mouse on his head who lies to him and tells him that's why. And then at the very end of the movie, he loses his feather, but then he realizes he actually still can fly. He could all along. And like, that's how it is with materials, especially with leaders and board members. Like, I think most of those people actually already do have the ability to speak persuasively about the organization, to tell stories, to connect with people, but they feel more confident about it when they have the physical piece.
And just one important corollary to the kind of Dumbo idea that I would put out there is that just as the feather's not actually what's making Dumbo fly, keep in mind that as much as we're about to tell you about everything a great, well-produced fundraising piece can do for you and why they're so important and worth investing in, they're never going to actually be the thing that gets it across the finish line. Yeah. They're never going to do everything. And the reason I think that's important is because, especially as you're going through with your executive director, with your board, they're going to attract a high level of scrutiny, and they should. But you have to keep in mind that we're ultimately providing beautiful and functional tools that help make you and your staff and your board more effective fundraisers.
Yeah, that's a good check on the like magic feather, view of things. Okay, so once you've taken the time to put these materials together, if you design them right and build the content right, they can really serve a variety of high value functions, and they can be quite durable. And when I say high value, what I mean is that something that increases the likelihood of a major gift or accelerates your progress toward significant giving. So things that, some of those uses, sending in advance of a donor visit, guiding or supporting a conversation during a visit, having it on the table and walking through it as a leave behind, something that helps you present in more of an institutional setting, something to hand out at an event, something to put in your board members' hands or staff to help them learn your message and get comfortable communicating on message. So all these different things, like these are really high value uses. They can all make you more likely to secure significant gifts. But what we find is that most organizations aren't really, most of the time, very well equipped for these things, or so when these needs come up, they're like grabbing whatever they can, grab the annual report, grab the strategic plan, they kind of throw stuff together. So we have this quality of being perpetually a little bit surprised by something that is in fact a quite regular and predictable part of our jobs. One thing I should clarify here, this is where I should distinguish, like we're not necessarily talking here about like your annual fund appeals that are more your sort of one-off fundraising materials or communications that go out. And we're not talking about your general organizational stuff like your annual report. We're talking about durable pieces that are specifically designed for these kinds of fundraising functions to support, in most cases, major giving, but also mid-level giving, upgrading high-level annual donors, engaging corporations and foundations, areas where like the right piece you can really get a lot of leverage out of. And what we find is that, yeah, like I said, very few organizations have the materials they need. Most would benefit from a reasonable investment. When we say investment, we mean like time and energy and to some extent money, but I feel like it's often the time and energy and attention hurdle that is the most significant. It's really nobody's job to focus on this in most organizations, so it doesn't get done. And this is important. You can do this stuff pretty much at any budget, and we're going to show you ways to do that. There are ways to invest in these materials that are maybe appropriate for your organization, your scale, what you're doing, but the core value of having these is about the thought and time that you build into them, not as much the money that you spend on them. So we want to actually launch a poll here, and we want to ask everyone, basically, where are you at? Are you in a campaign? Because that's really significant in this situation. And do you have current fundraising materials of the kind that we are talking about here? So we're going to leave this open for just, I don't know, 30 seconds or a minute or so.
Good chance to take a water break.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So, is the poll? Oh, here it comes. Where do we see the poll results? Oh, cool. All right. So Molly's holding these up for us to see. Okay. So 30% are yes campaign, yes materials. 19% yes campaign, no materials. About 30% no campaign, but they do have materials, and the other quarter. So actually, that's pretty well distributed. Yeah. Y'all are doing better than I was expecting. I thought more folks were going to be in the no materials camp overall, but it looks like it was about 50-50.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what I would have guessed is that the campaign is the thing that prompts most people to produce, or most organizations to produce their high value fundraising materials. And we often find that that can be the thing that slips when you're not a campaign. So it's really great to see that so many of you are giving this thought for projects and initiatives outside of the campaign as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks. Thanks for doing our poll. That's really helpful. We had 2 more, but then we broke them. So that is the only poll that we will have. All right. So let's now, we want to, for the kind of the middle section of the webinar here, we want to kind of take you on a little shopping trip, I guess. We're going to share just examples of different types of material, like different categories of materials that might suit different organizations under different circumstances. And then we're going to think about which ones you would choose or go to under different circumstances. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat.
Yeah. We want to start by thinking about kind of what's the core go-to persistent piece, which is the brochure. And I think what's important to think about here is that a brochure is not always the same as another brochure, right? You can approach a brochure in so many different ways and at so many different levels. We want to walk you through what a few of those might look like. And the first one to think about is what we kind of call internally a prestige brochure. So it's really those brochures that are designed to feel special. You know, they're richly produced, amply designed, and they kind of are the things that when you get them, you feel bad about throwing them away. That's how I think of it, right? It's like, so you get so many materials and you can kind of toss it aside a little bit. This is the one you pick it up on your desk and you're like, oh, I'm going to leave that there a little bit longer. And really what it does, what this piece is able to do so uniquely is really convey an elevated feeling and an elevated emotion, a sense of emotion that in turn kind of conveys a vision that elevates the campaign or fundraising initiative as a whole. These are the kind of things that are really effective when you really have a fundraising initiative that's driven more by themes or emotions or big ideas than by projects or details. When you're really looking to reposition your organization or kind of elevate it in donors' minds or the community's minds, or really just when your audience expects it. There are going to be some board members, some donors where the culture is kind of expecting something special, or that's almost like a social organization, right? It feels like we're one of the big dogs in the room and we want to see that reflected in what you give us when you're asking for a major gift. And so this is just an example of what that can look like. This is a piece we put together for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. You can see that it's really, you know, a physical object driven by beautiful, carefully selected images. And, you know, that's reflective of just who they are as an organization. It's an art and design school, one of the leading ones in the nation. So we needed to reflect that by making a piece that felt like a custom, tailor-made object for their donors. At the same time, you'll see how light the copy is. It's really about the big ideas, the themes, the vision, because we're trying to get people to understand what an important organization SAIC is and what they meant to the city of Chicago. And in doing so, we're helping them as they launch their first independent campaign separate from the Art Institute, the museum, to kind of step out and position themselves as one of the leading institutions in this philanthropic community. So that's one example just of a prestige brochure. What we kind of consider our go-to is the standard brochure, right? I think of this almost in baseball terms as the super utility player, right? So it's not going to be, what's great about that is it's the kind of thing, yeah, I'm a big Cubs fan for those who haven't met me in person. But, you know, this is the kind of piece that can meet all your needs, speak to a variety of different audiences and types of donors, but do all of them really well, right? It can balance message with visual elements. It can kind of convey a sense of emotion and vision while also providing enough substantive copy to get into what you're actually raising money for. And kind of like a super utility player, it tends to provide a lot of bang for your buck, right? You're not spending the same money you would get for the big home run hitter, or the guy who strikes out 200 a year, but you're gonna really get that thing that gets you to the next level and across the finish line. So if you go ahead, Andy, and kind of show some samples here. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. You'll see it's bright, it's colorful, it's child focused rather than member focused. They're the leading organization of pediatricians in the United States. And it provides information while driving towards big picture outcomes and conveying that vision for what's next for the organization and for children's health. So this really is the kind of format that, again, I think you can consider the standard if you want to produce just a beautiful and memorable print piece, but especially for kind of clearer or project-driven initiatives that are not going to be quite as dependent on tone, emotion, and vision. And really, if you want to produce something that's going to have a lot of flexibility and a long shelf life because it can speak to so many different people and play so many roles.
So on the next step down in terms of production level is a simpler brochure. And here we're thinking of maybe something that's got 4 to 8 pages, or they might actually be panels in a folding piece. This may not actually be, you know, bound in a staple bound. This might be you know, a piece that unfolds at a somewhat larger format size.
Kind of think of like a trifold or a gatefold piece.
Yeah, although I want to, you know, I think if it's a campaign, if it's something significant, I think you still want the overall panel size to be reasonably large, so it doesn't feel small. It shouldn't feel like a rack card.
Yeah.
I think the vertical dimension is actually the most important in that. Like a tall, narrow piece still feels big for some reason. Anyway, yeah, so this content-wise, this is really copy-driven, and just, you know, the design becomes a little bit simpler. The main point with one of these is just to show still, hey, this is different from our annual fund. This is setting the campaign or the major gift initiative apart from the more day-to-day asks. So, you know, the point of having a piece like this, even at this smaller scale, is just to still set it apart. The example we want to show here, this is from GSA Foundation. And this piece, I love this piece. This actually only has 4 pages of content. You'll see them all here.
And you should probably explain what GSA is.
Oh,
too.
It's the Geological Society of America. And so this is their foundation. And you know, this piece was about like 8 or 9 inches square, so kind of, you know, felt medium sized, but not feel small. Didn't make the campaign feel dinky. But it really only has these 4 internal pages of content. But there's enough thought and care into the design and layout that it still feels special. And then in the back pocket, we did some supplemental inserts to provide next level information. So this is, you know, this is a really simple piece. But again, it definitely conveys, hey, this is still something special.
And I would just say too, you know, you can see what the effect of each type of brochure can be. With the SAIC one, where it's a campaign for an art and design school stepping forward and investing in its people, we wanted to orient them and set the tone for the campaign in subsequent follow-up conversations that would get into more detail once they kind of feel stirred and engaged. With the AAP one, it's really about reaching people on every level, kind of providing some sense of excitement, a mission-oriented sense of what it's all about, children's health, but also sharing kind of ideas and some logical flow for what the impetus is. The GSA one, the Geophysical Society of America, Geophysical, am I getting that right?
Geological Society.
Geological Society for America. You can see it still is changing the context because it's a well-designed, well-produced piece, but it's primarily about the message and the information and reaching people on that more logical level while establishing an elevated framework.
Yeah, the audience is scientists.
Right.
Like they want something different from materials than you know, the big time art collectors that we're going to for SAIC. Okay, so the next step staying in print materials is to actually move out of brochure land entirely and do more of a white paper style case. You know, the length of this could be anything. I thought of it mostly in the 3 to 6 page range. This is something I think you would think about being able to print this in office, which might mean you can update it more readily if your campaign or project is still kind of a moving target. This is entirely copy driven. The design is focused really just on like page layout and you know, having a nice clean page design. I do think it's still important, even if you're just doing like a white paper style case, it's still important to have some level of design, because like a Word document will always feel like a draft. Like even, you know, even if you're just putting some little brand touches on it, it still changes the status and the feeling of the document. So again, the impact here is it conveys professionalism, it gets the job done. It can be a good interim piece if things are still evolving. So here's an example that, again, you know, it's a simple, nicely laid out, professional looking, simple text document. And also in the print material category, we've shown actually a couple examples already that have these, but project case inserts. These are, you know, typically 1 to 4 pages. These are, you know, pieces that you supplement a main brochure with to give a next level of detail around the projects in a campaign or the initiatives that you're raising money for. It's a good solution for a campaign that has multiple projects. Because then you can kind of let the brochure do the vision work and be at a more visionary level, and then add into it the more substantive detail. You can swap them in and out if you have a donor who you know is only interested in one thing. Also, you can let the inserts be more editable. So let's say, if you've got a campaign, you're going to be 5 years, you want to have, and the projects are still evolving, or you're going to add projects a year or two from now, and you don't want to have to go back and reprint the brochure at that time. You can do the main brochure in a really stable, static, content that's not going to change, and then let the project cases come and go. And those potentially you could print in your office. And again, this is just meant to convey the depth and detail of plans to show your donors that yes, we've got this big vision that's exciting, that's why you're paying attention, but we're also have detailed substance around each of the projects.
One subtle variation I would just put out there for you to consider as well. We think of these primarily as project case inserts, and primarily as being about that next level of detail, which really frees your core print piece or brochure to focus on vision and the big picture and just kind of share what you're doing with your projects at a higher level that helps them get that big idea and want to engage more deeply. But sometimes we'll use these inserts to really share different types of stories or different amounts of program information. And that can be a really effective supplement too. While there are times where you might want to produce, a 30-page prestige brochure that has both the visionary messages, the creative execution, as well as kind of the project details and supplemental stories, oftentimes we find it works well to keep those separate, and then you can come and give your donor the project details or the story that you've picked just for them because it's what they want to hear about.
Final piece of print material here is a folder and stationery system. So here we're thinking about things like having a nice 9x12, slightly oversized presentation folder that you could tuck all the materials into, having dedicated letterhead, note cards, pledge cards, envelopes for all of that stuff. This is mostly if you're in a campaign where you want to have, campaign branded communications to use throughout a donor cultivation process. Typically the content of these is just the branding. Maybe you put the committee list or the board list, your contact information, certainly. And the impact of this, like why do this? It's not essential, but it can be a nice way to elevate the materials to convey that the campaign is a special conversation. And especially having the folder can be really nice to just give you a way to pull materials together, to put together a nicely packaged presentation to a donor. So again, very straightforward. The level of investment on these can vary, especially on the folder, depending on whether you're printing on a pre-constructed like stock white folder, or whether you're doing a custom design that has to be printed on heavy stock, then cut into a weird shape and folded and glued. Like folders can get weirdly expensive depending on how you produce them, but still can be worth it.
So most of what we've been talking about has been print pieces and how you can think about various types of print pieces and combine them to create that special impression for your major donors in particular as you prepare for face-to-face cultivation solicitation. But we think there are other kinds of materials that you should consider as you're preparing to go through with a major fundraising initiative. And one is really just a straightforward presentation deck that you put in a little bit of extra care and attention to. Now we say here on the slide PowerPoint deck, but I would think about that kind of like Kleenex. Sure. Keynote works just as well, and we certainly have seen clients where they like to load up Keynote on their CEO's iPad so he can walk through it with someone in a one-on-one setting.
It actually works better, but nobody has it or uses it, so
The key thing here is that you want to think of a PowerPoint as being something that's really optimized for presentation and cultivation meetings in particular. It works really great for small group meetings, and it works really great when you want to sit down with the donor and kind of walk them through something in a slightly more streamlined manner that supports you leading through conversation. It can be a great prompt and a great source of comfort, especially for board members, to have key messages and key factoids on the screen so that they can just talk from the heart and a little more naturally. The key thing here that's different from a normal PowerPoint is that we want you to think about how this is a tailor-made piece when you're going through a very significant fundraising initiative, rather than a piece that's built on templates. We have a great example here from AAP once again. We wanted to show you this because it's really the same case we shared before, but optimized for a very different format. you'll see how light on copy it is, but how it really features, examples and facts and figures so that you have no pressure to memorize them. It's simply letting you get the big idea, the supporting information you might want to draw on, and then speak one-on-one in a more flexible and flowing manner, either to an individual donor or to the group of donors that you're sharing this presentation with. And when you're considering whether you want to produce one of these, one thing I would just put out there is think about the style of your leadership, what they're comfortable with, what they need, whether for staff leaders or for boards. This kind of thing will really help them get out there like Dumbo's feather and be the most effective advocates they can. And then think about your fundraising strategy. Consider if you're going to be having small group dinners or small cultivation events, where standing up and giving a little more of a formal presentation, just a 10-minute speech or so, would really be beneficial to you. So that's how we think about kind of the more digital presentations, whether it's on screen in front of an audience or kind of put onto your iPad or Surface. But we sometimes like to vary this and produce it in the format we kind of consider a flip book. Now, this is taking that PowerPoint format, but optimizing it for printing rather than an on-screen presentation. And what that does is really allow you to use it one-on-one when you're sitting next to a donor, right? You can kind of literally flip through it page by page while still looking them in the eye and talking to them. But you can also design it and use it as a leave behind. So it's really a great piece if you're only going to have one, because it supports that in-person meeting like a presentation, but serves as a leave behind much like a well-produced brochure would. And so here's one example. It's actually the one on the right there. That's for the Fenn School out in Massachusetts. You can see how they took their flip book, they printed it out and spiral bound it. And if you go forward just a little bit, Anna, you can see how it shares renderings. It has details about the actual materials, but it also, the actual projects, but it also has messages and provides prompts for the solicitor or the cultivator to be able to speak a little more personally about what we're doing. Now, when you're doing a flip book, it doesn't, though, have to be quite as straightforward as a presentation often is. You can approach it a little bit more like a prestige brochure. And so we want to show you one example of that. This is for the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. And you'll see here how there are just really carefully produced and really beautiful design elements woven in, that it's approached with great visuals, photography, and renderings, and that it actually allows itself to provide not only prompts like you're seeing on screen right now, but full paragraphs where needed, because we intend it to be used not just in the moment, but as a leave behind. So like right here, this is a good example of the kind of slide that if I was meeting with Andy one-on-one, I would kind of just talk over this history and really what it means to have a new home for these new kind of musical experiences, and sharing a few details of what that includes. But I wouldn't feel as much pressure to capture kind of the sweep of that message, because I know the material will do it for me. The final piece we want to talk about then is video. Now, video, I just want to be upfront, there's a lot to say. This could be just an entire webinar of its own. What we want to share with you for right now is just that video is oftentimes a substantial investment, and it's because it's worth doing well. If you're going to do video, you usually want to make sure you have great footage, a lot of really nice B-roll that's going to work and move the donor, and kind of, that it's going to be worth taking the time to produce it till it has the desired effect. There are some examples, like if you want to do, select talking head interviews that you might be able to share on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook. That's very much worth it as well. But when we're talking about video, we're talking about a piece like you see on your screen right now, one that's going to just capture something special. Now, in terms of what's important to consider in producing a video, I would just encourage you to think about what video does more powerfully than any other medium, but also keep in mind what it can do. Video is going to feature people. It's going to get emotion and the big idea and that emotional orientation to the campaign and its vision across like nothing else can. It's not as great at sharing details, and you shouldn't try and force those in. But what a video can do is really, I think of it like a brochure can get you excited, but a video can make you cry. And this is the kind of thing that you might want to send to a donor ahead of time, so they see just how special and exciting and emotionally resonant this initiative is, or share in front of a big group, a presentation or an event, to kind of provide that level of emotional investment that might be hard for your leadership or board to get across in speech, or your print materials to get across in writing.
Yeah, I think that last point is really important. Sometimes the video can take the pressure off of you to convey the big visionary part of the case, because that's the part that people, I think a lot of people find most challenging, or at least a little uncomfortable. So they can, board members in particular can take a lot of comfort in knowing, okay, I can play the video to kind of set the tone for the conversation, and then I can kind of take it from there and walk them through how they relate to the organization, whether what they're interested in the campaign or the vision. So we had planned to do a fun poll on this little exercise, but the poll thing in GoToWebinar can only have 5 options, so we couldn't do this. So we're gonna do an imaginary poll. You're gonna use your imagination. We're gonna show you a couple scenarios where, let's say you're doing like sort of a medium-sized campaign, $40 million, and let's say that you have $80,000 to spend on materials. Now, I want all these numbers. I need to put like a lot of caveats on, because this is not a Campbell and Company price list I'm broadcasting to you. This is just some rough, really round numbers we plugged in to kind of capture the different levels of investment. This is assuming maybe you're working with a kind of a top shelf agency. And it's also assuming that all the case development work is already done, which that's actually the most important part. So let's say you had this much to spend and these kinds of things were on the menu. Look at this and think about how you would do that. And on the right side, you'll notice the presentations, the 2 different formats. If you do both of those, you can there's some efficiency there because the content is really standard or shared between them. And for video, we put in just 2 different price points because, I mean, honestly, video, you can spend like $10,000 or $15,000, or you can spend, 6 figures. It really comes down to the concept and the production level. I don't know, Pat, let me put you on the spot. Like, what would you do?
I was just going through and writing this down as you were speaking there.
Okay.
So obviously, like we were saying before, it depends kind of on what your specific situation is, your projects, your audience. But I kind of approach this thinking like, this is a big campaign. It's a $40 million campaign. You're making a significant investment materials. There's clearly something special here. So I'm approaching it with that kind of as my imaginary context. And my first pass at this, I cheated a bit.
Okay.
But I said I wanted to invest in a prestige brochure. I want to supplement it with the project inserts as well as stationery, a folder and stationery. I can put it all in. So I have just that really beautiful leave behind that's going to make it feel special and elevate it in donors' heads. And then I invested in a simple video because I think I want to be able to capture that emotion in the vision.
You blew our budget.
Yeah, I want 85. I think
80. Okay.
I have a good relationship with my boss and executive director. I'm able to stretch it.
You're gonna go to the agency and say, look, we need to. Yeah. We're such a good cause. Yeah. Can you just like kind of make it work?
So if I have to be really strict about staying within 80,000, I'd consider cutting the stationery and trying to get a pocket in that prestige brochure for the inserts. Or I would go from prestige brochure to standard brochure, again, depending on my needs and audience. But I'd want to try for this campaign to make that kind of sense of something special happen.
I see. So you're going you're going all in on print materials and video and like really trying to create a sense of elevating the campaign. Interesting. I feel like I would go for the 2 presentations because I don't know, I'm a geek for them. I find that so useful. I'd probably go for the presentations. Probably the simple video. What am I at? 45. What do I got left? Give me the standard brochure, and we'll get a very nice plain white presentation folder from Office Depot, and pretend it's the campaign folder.
Yeah. So you're going with, you got the video you can send beforehand.
Yes.
The presentations you can use to help with the cultivation conversation, and then just a really effective lead behind.
Yeah, I'm going like before, during, and after that donor meeting. I want like something for everything. All right. Let's go down to a smaller campaign, smaller budget. And here we brought the prices down, assuming this is like maybe you're working with a local agency that or a local partner, and let's say these budgets include your production costs as well as the design and development. So this includes your printing costs, let's say. So here this is really, you feel the constraint here. but I'm guessing this is like a significant investment for this organization that maybe they haven't done a 10 million, maybe this is their first campaign. So there's still some need to like show the donor that, like, get donors to think about them on a level that they haven't before, because it's like their first time stepping up to 10 million. So, okay, I'm putting you on the spot. So what'd you do?
I'm going with one of the presentations, either the deck or the flip book, depending on my culture and strategy and what I think will be most useful. In this case, let's just say flip book, because I think that's the kind of thing you can keep editing, you can use really flexibly, and it can kind of evolve over the course of the campaign, depending on what my remaining budget might be as we move into subsequent phases. And then to supplement that kind of in-person cultivation tool, I'm investing in a standard brochure that would just meet all my needs and be a really effective leave behind that elevates the initiative, and then inserts. Because I really think for our first campaign, I want my donors to see, like, we have it buttoned up. We have all the thought in this and the detail, and you should not hesitate to make this kind of significant investment like you never have before. Because we've got the vision, we've got the plans, and we know what the impact will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I'd go for the flip book here too, just to like, I'd want that piece first so I could start having meetings, getting feedback, and like just get out there. And then give me like the standard brochure, the simple brochure, and then let's all go out to a nice dinner. I don't know. I think we're I think we can make it work with just that. Maybe a couple years down the road when you go public, you want to do a video for the public launch.
Definitely.
That's getting into a whole different area of strategy. All right. So what would you do if you could only produce one piece?
Flip book for me. I think the flip book is has the longest shelf life, because it's in kind of PowerPoint. You can keep updating it and editing it. Most importantly, it's just got that flexibility. You can customize it for different donors. You can focus just on the big picture, and you can have the more detailed slides. It really allows you to kind of do the most. It stretches in and out kind of like an accordion.
Yeah, I would, the same here, unless you know, like some people just don't, like some organizations just really struggle with presentations. And
that's a good point.
Like, I don't know, a few years ago, we used I used to tell every organization, like, this is the thing you need. And now as I'm getting old and I'm getting softer, I'm more like, okay, well, maybe we could just do, maybe the one piece is the standard brochure, or like some kind of just anchor print piece that makes the campaign real.
And as I'm sure many of you know and have put into use, while the flip book's really optimized for those in-person meetings, a brochure can be great to kind of flip through together side by side.
As long as you design it, as long as you design the content so that it's not just bricks of copy, and there are things you can point to and kind of use it as a guide to conversation. Okay, so what would you do if you have got like no outside budget, you got to do everything in-house?
That's a good question. So this depends on what my in-house capabilities are. So to answer this question, I'm going to pretend that we don't have the in-house capabilities to kind of produce those beautiful types of professionally printed brochures at the level I'm hoping to for this campaign. So I would focus really then on, I think, the flip book and inserts. I think those would be the ones that would really be the most useful if you're going to produce it in-house. I would consider, though, thinking about a standard brochure if you think that you're able to really do that well, because it's just such a flexible piece. Again, those super utility players, they're what win championships, guys. Ben Zobrist was huge for the Cubs, right?
So yeah, I feel like I would go with like a white paper style case that's just where you're just really trying to make the content shine. I would try to see if you could get a presentation version that's maybe just on like whatever our branded existing PowerPoint template is, but just try to put more thought and care into it so that it still has really strong messaging. Because like that's the background for all this. Is like these materials are only as good as the messaging that you have for them. So like try to do, like when people see PowerPoint, they think, oh God, that's because it's not PowerPoint's fault that most PowerPoints are terrible. Like I think you could do a good one. And then I might just really attend to packaging, like, with these pieces, can I get some kind of folder, some kind of like letter from the executive director to tuck in with it? Can I supplement them so that can I make it feel like a package that I'm putting in your hands, even if it's mostly out of just stuff from around the office?
So why don't we kind of just quickly go through some tips for great materials and see if we can get to
All right.
a few questions.
I'm going to burn through
yeah,
these.
This is all you.
Okay. All right. So get your message right first. Okay. So go back and watch the second webinar in the series. That's where we talk about this. Again, like expensive materials with muddy messaging don't really do anything for you. Simple materials with great messaging do everything you need. Choose quality over quantity. So that GSA, that little simple brochure, I love that piece because they could have made a 12-page brochure that was like at a lower production level, but instead they made like a 4-page brochure that really makes a good impression. Do one thing to make it special. I'm talking about production here, whether it's commissioning some new beautiful photography that people haven't seen from you before, or investing in like a really nice heavy cover stock of paper for the cover, or doing a little window cutout, or a foil treatment, or some kind of stamp, like some kind of texture on the piece. For major donors, for campaigns, it can be, you want a piece that doesn't feel disposable. So often like one production touch or investment can make that difference. On that point, I don't think we've ever worked with an organization where we go in and we say, oh, great, they already have all the photography that they need for this piece. Like, nonprofits don't invest in this nearly enough, but it's really not that expensive to get a couple days from a great photographer, and you can use that stuff for so many different things. Plan for shelf life and updates. Design pieces that you know you're going to be able to use for 2 or 3 years, and then plan that 2 or 3 years from now we're gonna do it again. We're gonna update it, and get on a regular cycle where you say, this year we're going to invest in new print materials. Next year maybe we'll do a new video. Maybe the year after that we'll do our website, or we'll do some new presentation materials. Make this a part of your regular planning. And back to something Pat said a while ago, make stuff that will actually help you go out and ask. So you kind of got to know yourself. What do you need? Are you really strong on the details but could use some help at the vision level? Or the inverse. What's going to help you, your board members, your executives actually get out there and feel comfortable? So think about it that way, because that's what these pieces are for. Let's take some questions. I hope we have some.
We do. Thank you for sending in your questions. If we don't get your question, Andy and Pat will be following up with you after the webinar. The first question is, what advice do you have for smaller nonprofit organizations that are just starting out and only have basic printing capabilities? And more specifically, do you have any tips for producing a basic trifold brochure?
Interesting. So this question, I'm going to speculate that this question might have come in before we did our slide about what would you do if you only could do one piece, and what could you do if you only were in-house. So those answers apply to this, but I would be looking to produce one piece that changes what people are used to seeing from you, whether it's in terms of the content, the level of the messaging, the level of the vision that you're communicating in terms of your message, or the production level, so that you can take someone, all those nice, high-end annual fund donors who are happy to give you that check every year, but don't think about you as a major gift place destination, something that you could use to extend what's possible in those conversations.
To answer that specific question about the trifold brochure, I would just keep in mind, trifolds tend not to have a lot of space for content, or if they do, they start to get cramped. So I would think about how you can nail down a really strong case message, ideally one that kind of positions you in a new light and introduces an initiative that's going to kind of move you and your mission forward in a whole new way. Kind of be confident using message-driven light copy that's going to kind of help reposition you, that you might use good photography. You want to probably just have an overview of the types of investment opportunities, and then consider, you're doing it in-house, you don't have a lot of printing capability. Create very lightly designed, even use it on your letterhead or template, white papers that are going to kind of provide those project cases, where the main goal there is, again, it's detail and it's information and rationale. Save it for those and try and use that trifold to elevate what you're doing and how you're presenting yourself.
Sure.
Great, thank you. And we might have time for one last question. What is your ideal mix, mailing brochures versus sending by way of email?
Okay, so most of the materials that we've been talking about today would be things that you mostly use one-on-one, hand-to-hand in direct donor cultivation. As you get down into that simple brochure, like the GSA example, those start to be pieces that it would make sense to mail out to maybe mid-level donors or high-level annual donors at a broader scale. You know, but most of what we've been talking about are pieces that are you almost don't want to mail. Like, I mean, you want to put it in someone's hands if you absolutely, if it's absolutely possible.
I would go back to where we began this conversation, where we're talking about kind of the material culture of fundraising. Well, face-to-face is always ideal. You know, when you're kind of trying to reach a much broader set of potential donors and think about maybe that mid-level donor you're trying to elevate, I do still think receiving a physical piece, just like that wedding invitation you get in the mail, it's going to make it feel special, going to make them look at it differently, more closely, and consider it in a new context. I would lean towards mailing, perhaps with email follow-up if they request it. But I think mailing is going to kind of replicate a lot of the power you get from the face-to-face handing it to them situation.
Or you might think about, like, with the way I spent my budget or ended up spending my budget on that first example, like sending a video, email, use email to send a video in advance.
Yeah.
If you're meeting in person, use whatever tool is most useful for you based on how you know yourself in that meeting, and then think of something to leave behind in their hands. I do think, you know, these kinds of print pieces, even the bigger, fancier ones, they certainly work as mailings. I just wouldn't want to do that until you're in like your public phase and you're ready for people to just send in whatever gift they want versus you sitting down and asking them for a specific gift. All right, well, I think we're out of time, but any other questions you have, please do email them to these addresses. And we hope you'll come back for the 5th webinar in this series in July. And thank you all. And thanks, Pat, for digging into this with me.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, have a good day.